When I was in my early 20s, I was broke, tired of bouncing between couches, and desperate to have a place I could call my own. I ended up renting a small one-bedroom apartment in a sketchy part of town. It wasn't great, peeling paint on the walls, the faint smell of mildew in the hallway, neighbors who seemed to scream at each other every night. But it was cheap, and at the time, that's all I cared about. For the first couple of weeks, it felt fine. I kept to myself, worked my shifts, and came home to my little apartment where I could finally shut the door and have privacy. But soon, I started to notice things. Nothing huge at first, just little inconveniences. I'd buy a six-pack of soda, drink 2, and the next day there'd only be 3 left. I'd roll out a fresh pack of toilet paper, and a few rolls would be gone. Sometimes, I'd set aside leftovers in the fridge, and when I opened it the next evening, the food was missing completely. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd eaten more than I thought. Maybe I'd misplaced something. Maybe I was just exhausted from work and wasn't paying attention. But deep down, I had this weird nagging feeling. Someone else was in my apartment. One night, I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, when I heard it for the first time. A faint creak. I froze, listening. It wasn't coming from the hallway, or from my neighbors. It was coming from above me. I lived on the top floor. There was no one above me. At least there shouldn't have been. I brushed it off as old pipes or the wood expanding with the temperature. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, slower, more deliberate, like someone crawling. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, my ears strained against the silence of the room, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Breathing. Not mine, not the sound of the old building groaning. This was soft, steady, human breathing, just barely audible above me. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I went downstairs and told the homeowner. He was this gruff older guy who seemed annoyed by any tenant interaction. I explained the noises, how it sounded like crawling, and he waved me off immediately. "Old building," he said. "The pipes make noises. You'll get used to it." I wanted to argue, but he made it clear the conversation was over. Still, I couldn't shake it. So that night, I decided to test it. I stayed in bed, lights off, pretending to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the faint, dragging sound of movement. But this time, it wasn't just above me. It was directly above my bed. Then came the breathing again. Slow, rhythmic. I lay frozen in the dark, staring up at the ceiling, my heart pounding so hard I was sure whoever was up there could hear it. I don't know how long I stayed like that, eyes wide open, paralyzed. But eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, I told myself I had been imagining things. But then the missing items started getting stronger. A razor from my bathroom was gone. A pair of socks I swore I just folded disappeared. Even food wrappers I left in the trash seemed to vanish. And sometimes when I come home from work, the air in my apartment just felt different, like the faint smell of cigarette smoke, even though I didn't smoke, or the unsettling sense that things weren't quite where I had left them. I started to notice it most with my bed. The sheets always felt slightly rumpled, like someone else had been lying in them. Finally, after another night of creaks and shifting above me, I told the landlord again. This time I was more insistent. He sighed and said, "Fine, I'll check the crawl space later." Hours later, my phone rang. It was him. His voice sounded different, shaky. You need to come here," he said. When I arrived, he showed me the crawl space above my ceiling, and my stomach dropped. There were signs of someone living up there. Blankets, food wrappers, empty bottles, even a bucket that I don't want to think too hard about. Whoever it was, they had been staying there for a while. But the worst part, there was a small hatch in my closet ceiling. I'd never noticed it before because it was covered by an old cardboard box. But the hatch could be pushed open from the inside, meaning whoever was up there had been coming down into my apartment. While I slept, the landlord called the police. They searched the crawl space in my apartment, but the person was gone. They couldn't find fingerprints, couldn't find any way to track them. All they could tell me was that whoever was had clearly been living there for some time. The detective asked me if I'd noticed anything missing. I told him about the food, the toiletries, the razor, even the socks. Then he asked a question that still chills me to this day. Did you ever notice any of your clothes move? Like your shirts, pants, or maybe your underwear? I realized then that yes, I had. I just hadn't thought much of it at the time. The police left, telling me to call if anything else happened. But that night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep there. I packed a bag and stayed at a friend's place. The next morning, I went back to grab some things. I remember standing in the middle of my apartment, looking around, and feeling this awful awareness that my home had never really been mine. Someone had been there with me, watching me, breathing above me as I lay in bed, possibly even standing over me while I slept. And the thought that disturbed me the most, what if they hadn't just been stealing food? What if they had been standing in my room, watching me in the dark? I moved out a week later. I didn't care about losing my deposit. I didn't care about the inconvenience. I just needed to get away. The police never caught the person. I never found out who they were or how long they had been up there. But even now, years later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I hear faint creaking above me, and I'll never stop wondering, was the person only watching me from the ceiling? Or were they watching me much closer, maybe even inches away? I've always been someone who liked to stay active. Running helped me clear my head, especially after long, stressful days at work. The only problem was, with my schedule, I usually didn't get off until around 9 or 10 p.m. By then, the sun was long gone. At first, I didn't think much of it. I lived in a suburban neighborhood. Quiet streets, trimmed lawns, the occasional car rolling by. It seemed safe enough. But looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts sooner. Because what started as simple night runs turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. It was late September, just starting to get chilly at night. I threw on a hoodie, laced up my shoes, and set out. The street lamps cast long yellow glows on the pavement, and the only sounds were my shoes hitting the sidewalk and the distant chirp of crickets. About 10 minutes into my run, I noticed him. A man across the street, walking slowly. At first, I thought nothing of it. Plenty of people walked at night. Maybe he was headed home. But the more I ran, the more I realized he was keeping pace with me. Every time I sped up, he did too. Every time I slowed, so did he. Always stay the same distance away. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe we just happened to be going the same way. Still, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder again and again. His outline was always there. Same distance, same steady walk. The next night, I went out again. I told myself I was being paranoid. But sure enough, about halfway through my route, there he was. Same man, same side of the street. Same slow, deliberate walk that somehow always matched my pace. I couldn't make out much detail. The streetlights didn't reach his face, and he always seemed to stay just far enough away that I couldn't get a clear look. But I could tell he was tall, thin, wearing dark clothes. I tried changing routes, turning left instead of right, cutting through different streets. But no matter where I went, he was there, always the same distance away. That's when I started to feel it, that prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the kind you get when you know someone's watching you. One night, I decided to stop running. I told myself, "You're being ridiculous. Just stop, see what he does." So I slowed down, bent over, pretended to tie my shoe. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might give me away. I looked up suddenly, and for the first time, he wasn't walking. He was standing completely still. Not across the street anymore, not keeping pace, just standing there, facing me. I couldn't see his face, but I knew without a doubt that his eyes were locked on me. I jumped up and bolted home, sprinting faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't stop until I was inside with the door locked, gasping for air. When I looked back out the window, the street was empty. After that, I stopped jogging for a few days. I figured maybe it was just some weird guy. Maybe I was overreacting, but the fear lingered. Every time I looked outside at night, I half expected to see him standing there. About a week later, I finally convinced myself to go out again. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't going to let fear control me. The run started normal. Quiet streets, cool night air. But maybe 10 minutes in, I felt it again, that creeping sensation that I wasn't alone. I glanced across the street. There he was. Same distance, same steady pace. That night, I cut the run short. I went straight home, locked the door, and tried to calm down. But the next morning, when I stepped outside to grab the paper, I saw something taped to my front door. A single sheet of paper. On it, written in messy, uneven handwriting, were 4 words. I like watching you. My stomach dropped. I called the police immediately. 2 officers came to take a report. I showed them the note, told them about the man following me. They nodded, wrote things down, asked me questions. But I could tell they didn't think much of it. One of them said, "Could just be some kid messing around." The other added, "We'll patrol the neighborhood tonight. See if anything comes up." That was it. That night, I barely slept. Every little creak of the house made me jump. I kept checking the window, convinced I'd see him standing out there. Over the next week, I didn't run at all, but that didn't stop him. I catch glimpses of him from inside my house. A shadow on the sidewalk, a figure standing across the street. Always far enough that I couldn't see his face, but close enough that I knew it was him. Once, I thought I saw him standing under a street lamp, just staring at my house. By the time I worked up the courage to look again, he was gone. I started to feel trapped, afraid to leave, afraid to stay. One night, I was sitting in my living room, watching TV with the curtains drawn. I thought I heard something outside, like soft footsteps on the grass. I turned off the TV and sat in silence. My heart was racing. Then I heard it, a faint tapping, at the window behind me. I spun around. Through the thin curtain, I could see the faint outline of a figure. Someone was standing right there, inches away, separated only by a thin piece of fabric and glass. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After what felt like forever, the shadow moved away. When I finally worked up the courage to check, the yard was empty. But the next morning, I saw it again. Another note slipped under my door. This one just said, "Why did you stop running?" That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I called the police again, begged them to do something. They promised extra patrols, but I could hear the doubt in their voices. I stayed at a friend's place for a few days after that. I didn't feel safe going home. When I finally returned, everything seemed normal. No notes, no signs of him. I started to think maybe he had moved on. But on my first night back, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a sound that still makes my skin crawl. The sound of someone softly whispering outside my bedroom window. I couldn't make out the words, but it was low, steady, like someone talking to themselves. I grabbed my phone, hand shaking, ready to call 911. But when I turned on the light, the whispering stopped. I looked outside. Empty. The police never found him. No arrests, no leads. I moved out not long after, too paranoid to stay in that house any longer. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted from me. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving or walking alone, I still get that creeping sensation, that tingling on the back of my neck that tells me I'm not alone. And every time, I can't help but wonder, what if he's still out there, still watching, still waiting for me to run again? A couple of years ago, a friend and I went on a cross-country road trip. We were both broke, fresh out of college, and wanted to see as much of the country as we could without spending too much. That meant sleeping in cheap motels. And if you've ever stayed in those off-the-highway places, you know they have a certain feeling, a stale kind of silence, like the walls have seen too much and don't care anymore. We pulled into one late one night after driving for almost 10 hours straight. It was small, 2 stories, the kind of place where the neon vacancy sign buzzes and flickers like it might go out any second. The moment we walked into the lobby, I felt uneasy. The man at the front desk didn't greet us. He didn't even look surprised to see us. He just slid the guest book toward us and stared, this strange half-smile frozen on his face. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just weird. But as we walked down the hallway toward our room, I swear I could feel his eyes on us. When we unlocked the room, the smell hit me first. It was faint but sour, like old sweat mixed with cleaning chemicals that couldn't quite cover it up. The room itself looked ordinary. 2 beds, an old TV, a nightstand with a lamp that flickered when we turned it on, curtains so thin that the parking lot lights bled right through them. I wanted to laugh at myself for feeling paranoid, but there was this heaviness in the air, like we weren't supposed to be there. My friend didn't seem to notice. He flopped onto the bed, scrolling through his phone, exhausted. I tried to settle in too, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't until I turned off the lamp and lay back that I saw it. A tiny red, faint but glowing, in the corner of the room near the air vent. At first, I thought it was just some part of the vent system, but the longer I stared, the more it looked like a camera lens. I sat up uneasy. "Hey," I said to my friend, pointing. "Do you see that?" He looked over, squinting. "What?" "That light, by the vent." He frowned, got up, and walked closer. Then he swore under his breath. "That's a camera." We searched the room after that, hearts pounding, and what we found made my stomach twist. There was a tiny lens inside the smoke detector, another in the alarm clock, even one on the TV stand, barely noticeable unless you know what to look for. There were cameras, watching, recording. Furious, we stormed back down to the front desk. The man was still there, the same half-smile on his face. "There are cameras in our room," I said, slamming the key down on the counter. "What the hell is this?" He just looked at us, unfazed. Then, with a calm voice that made my skin crawl, he said, "Some people like to watch." That was it. No denial, no surprise, just those words. We called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, every single camera was gone. The smoke detector was empty. The alarm clock was clean. Even the vent had nothing in it. The clerk, suddenly acting confused, told him he had no idea what we were talking about. He even suggested maybe we'd imagined it. The police couldn't do anything. No evidence. No proof. We were shaken. Too shaken to stay the night. We threw our stuff in the car and drove until morning, both of us too wired to sleep. We told ourselves it was over. Just some creepy motel, just one bad night. But it wasn't over. Not even close. A few weeks later, after the trip was over and I was back home, I opened my email one morning and froze. There was a message from an unknown sender. No subject line, just an attachment. A single still image. It was me, in that motel room, standing in front of the mirror, changing clothes. I slammed my laptop shut, my stomach dropping. When I opened again, the email was gone, completely vanished from my inbox, like it had never been there. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started getting phone calls from blocked numbers. Every time I answered, there was nothing, just silence, sometimes breathing. Other times, faint static like an old recording. Once, I swear I heard my own voice on the line, something I'd said in the motel room, laughing with my friend. That's when it hit me. Whoever had those cameras hadn't just been watching live. They had been recording. I reached out to my friend, panicked. He said he hadn't gotten any emails, but then he admitted something that made my skin crawl even more. He'd been getting the calls too, and one of them had played back audio of him snoring in the motel bed. They weren't just watching me. They had been watching both of us. Every second. It all came to a head one night when I got another email. No text this time, just a short video. I hesitated before opening it, and then I wished I hadn't. The video showed me asleep in the motel bed. The camera was close, too close, like whoever was filming wasn't using one of the hidden cameras, but was actually in the room. The figure holding the camera moved closer and closer to my sleeping face. Close enough that you could hear my breathing. Close enough that I twitched in my sleep, almost like I sensed something. Then the screen went black, and just before the video ended, I heard a whisper, "See you soon." I called the police again. I showed them what I had, but the email disappeared before I could forward it. Just gone, like it had never existed. They told me there was nothing they could do. No evidence, no trace. To this day, I don't know who sent those emails. I don't know if it was the clerk, someone working with him, or someone else entirely. But I do know this. Someone had been watching me, recording me, standing over me as I slept. And the worst part? Sometimes when I'm home alone, I'll catch a faint red light glowing in the corner of my room. I tell myself it's nothing, just a reflection, just my imagination. But deep down I know, someone, somewhere, still likes to watch.